Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Israel's conflict with Hamas has reached Qatar's capital after a deadly airstrike on Doha's West Bay killed 6 people, including Hamas members and civilians. The attack, codenamed Summer of Fire, struck as ceasefire talks were underway, sparking outrage from Qatar and its allies. The death toll in the occupied Gaza Strip has exceeded 64,000, and the latest Israeli attacks have complicated negotiations even further.
This was the moment an Israeli airstrike blasted Doha on Tuesday in what Israeli officials say was an attack aimed at top Hamas leaders. The Palestinian group has long had its political base in the Qatari capital. Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas's exiled Gaza chief and top negotiator, was among the targets, Israeli officials say. Hamas said 5 of its members had been killed in the strike, including al-Hayya's son, but that officials in the ceasefire negotiating team survived the strike. The attack took place shortly after Hamas's armed wing claimed responsibility for a shooting that killed 6 people at a bus stop on the outskirts of Jerusalem on Monday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he authorized a, quote, surgical precision strike on Hamas chiefs.
At the beginning of the war, I promised that Israel would reach those who perpetrated this horror. And today, Israel and I have kept that promise.
The assault will likely shatter efforts to reach a ceasefire, especially since negotiations took place in Qatar. The mother of an Israeli hostage condemned Netanyahu for the attack. I am trembling with fear, she says, adding that the strike, quote, essentially sentenced her son to death. In Gaza, an Israeli evacuation order urging some displaced Palestinians to flee led to panic and confusion as Israel said it was about to obliterate the area in an assault to wipe out Hamas. Residents of Gaza's biggest urban area have been expecting an onslaught for weeks since the Israeli government devised a plan to deal Hamas a fatal blow in what it says are the group's last strongholds.
We are attempting to delay death a little longer. We have been displaced approximately 30 times, moving from one death to another, but we are trying to postpone death a little.
Israel's offensive has reduced much of Gaza to rubble and killed more than 64,000 Palestinians, according to health officials in the enclave. Israel has also launched airstrikes and other military action in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Yemen in the course of the Gaza conflict.
I'm sorry, if you are talking specifically about the talks on Gaza, Qatar has spared no effort in order to stop this war, and will do whatever it can to stop this war, to stop this hostility on Gaza. Now, when it comes to the current talks, I don't think there is something valid right now, while after we're seeing such an attack happening like this.
Welcome back to the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kojakanar, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Mustafa, there is a lot of confusion now as to what's going to happen in this conflict. Qatar was attacked yesterday. Hamas was attacked yesterday. Hamas members were attacked. Obviously, Khalil al-Hayya, who's the chief negotiator, he was the target, but he was not killed. His son, however, has passed away. He has embraced martyrdom. Mustafa, what are the latest developments? Where do we go from here?
Omar, yesterday, Israeli security forces launched airstrike against Qatar's capital, Doha, with the aim of eliminating Hamas negotiators. And the Israeli attack resulted in the death of some of low-level Hamas members, and high-level members survived the Israeli attack. And following this attack, Qatar immediately condemned this attack as cowardly and reckless violation of its sovereignty and international law. Qatari decision makers called this attack as state terrorism. And we know that Israel right now is determined to deepen its military campaign against regional countries in the Middle East. And other Arab nations also immediately condemned Israeli attack, reaffirming their strong support for Qatar's political sovereignty and national security. On the other hand, we know that the United States has one of its biggest military installations in Qatar, and it means that without the American knowledge, any fighter jets can enter and penetrate Qatari airbase. And right now, U.S. President Donald Trump is trying to distance himself from the Israeli attack, because right now regional countries are scrutinizing United States credibility when the topic comes to the national security issues in the Middle East. Trump expressed his frustration over Israeli attacks in Doha, but we know that Israel cannot conduct these type of attacks within Qatar without the American knowledge. And we know that we are living in an anarchic international system, and anarchic international system requires self-help. Trump tried to assure Qatar that these type of attacks will not happen again. But how can you trust another one if you want to survive in the international politics? And I think that regional countries will be supposed to speak the language that will Israel understand. I think that unless regional countries takes military steps in terms of deterring Israeli actions, I think that Israel will continue its military campaign across the region.
Mustafa, you're saying countries in the Middle East must take action. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, all these countries have condemned whatever happened yesterday, the attack at the political leadership headquarters of Hamas in Doha. Now, you know what's interesting is Trump wasn't notified. He said that he was not notified about the attacks, but Steve Witkoff, who's the Middle East envoy for the United States, he said that he informed the Qatari authorities. Why is there confusion now? Why is the United States denying this? Because Israel said that we did inform the United States. So also another thing that I want to touch upon here is the fact that the Israeli UN envoy, Danny Danon, he has said that we don't always act in the interests of the United States. So how complicated is the relationship between the U.S. and Israel at this point?
Well, right now there are many contradictory statements coming from both sides. Some Israeli officials told news agencies yesterday that they informed in advance the United States about the upcoming attacks for Doha. On the other hand, Trump also also expressed something different from the Israeli statement. Qatari decision makers are also making their own statements about the Israeli attack, and it is clearly showing that there is miscommunications between regional and international stakeholders right now, and it is clearly showing that nobody trusts themselves in the region. As we mentioned, right now Qatar cannot count on the United States when it comes to its national security and territorial integrity. As you know, Israel is not only taking aim at Palestinians living in the occupied territories, they are also targeting other countries' political sovereignty and territorial integrity in the region. We know that Israel conducted several airstrikes in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria, and right now they strike against Qatar, and it is clearly showing that regional countries will be supposed to unite in terms of addressing security challenges posed by the Israeli security forces. In May, we know that Trump visited some Gulf countries, and he paid an official visit to Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. And these Gulf countries treated Trump as if he is the king. And it is clearly showing that these countries cannot count on the United States or cannot rely on the American role in terms of ensuring their political survival. I think that these countries should reconsider their bilateral or multilateral relationships with the United States, because we know that United States under the Trump administration is giving always priority to Israel's so-called national security demands in the region. I hope that these countries will reconsider their bilateral relationships with the United States, and they will take military steps in terms of deterring Israel from further strikes.
Mustafa, the Qatari response has been obviously of anger, and Qatar says that this was a cowardly attack, it was a reckless attack by the state of Israel. It also said that Israel is a terrorist state. Now, Mustafa, obviously this also puts questions on Qatar's role as a mediator. We're going to discuss that later. But before that, I want to ask you, how has Turkey responded to the attacks in Doha? What is the message that was given by the Turkish Foreign Ministry?
Omar, yesterday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan held a phone conversation with Qatari Emir Al Thani to discuss the possible steps to deter Israel from further strikes, and President Erdogan reaffirmed Turkey's ironclad support for Qatar's national sovereignty, political stability, and territorial integrity. As you know, since the very beginning of the crisis, Turkey has been always calling for regional unity and solidarity to deal with the security problems in the Middle East. As you know, Turkey has already cut its trade activities with Israel, and Turkey is always calling for concrete steps against Israel. And yesterday, Turkish Foreign Ministry also condemned Israeli strikes happening in Qatar's capital, Doha. We know that Turkey has its own military base located in Qatar. I think that maybe Turkey will reconsider to increase its air defense systems for its military base in Qatar, because right now United States is controlling Qatar's airspace, and United States cannot ensure security across the Middle Eastern country. I think that Turkey will continue to take new steps in terms of increasing regional awareness about Israel's expansionist geopolitical agenda in the region. I hope that regional countries located in the Gulf region in particular, will take Turkey's security demands into the consideration, and they will be able to take military steps against Israel, because I think that unless regional countries take military steps against Middle East spoiled child Israel, I think that Israeli security forces will be turning a blind eye to international or regional criticism.
Well, so no one was expecting this attack in Qatar, right? And Israel has said on multiple occasions that it will attack Hamas members no matter where they are. And some of them are living in Turkey as well. We've been seeing they've been traveling back and forth between Turkey and Qatar. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has also hosted Hamas members for ceasefire talks. Do you think that Israel would dare to attack Turkey, and what could be Turkey's response in such a case?
As you mentioned, you said no one was expecting Israeli attack against Qatar, but personally, I think that Israel can attack any country in the Middle East except Turkey, because we know that Turkey is the member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and Turkey is one of the most important. Turkey has one of the most strongest armies in the world. I don't think that Israel would dare to attack Turkey. Yes, there are escalation between Turkey and Israel in the Middle East right now. I think Turkey's rising geopolitical influence in the Middle East is testing Israel's patience and is pushing Israel's buttons. As you know, Netanyahu visited the United States this year, and he clearly called upon Trump to take decisive steps against Turkey's rising geopolitical influence in the region. But on the contrary to expectations of Netanyahu, Trump publicly sided with Turkey and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and he called on Netanyahu to be reasonable if Israel wants to deal with its security problems with Turkey. I am reiterating that no one can dare to attack Turkey right now, because if someone attacks Turkey, there will be regional ramifications for it, and Turkey will immediately retaliate against any security threat against its national security. And right now in Israel, there are some rumors that the next target will be Turkey, and Turkish decision makers are always warning Israel against provocations in the Middle East, because I think that Turkey will not sit idle if its national security will come under threat. I think that right now Turkish decision makers reiterate at every opportunity that Turkey doesn't want any military confrontation with Israel in the Middle East, but it doesn't mean that Turkey will allow any fait accompli in the Middle East.
Well, so let's take a look at Qatar's role over the last few years, right? It's not just Hamas that Qatar has been supporting. Qatar was also hosting the Afghan Taliban when we saw the withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan. So Qatar has been there. Qatar has acted as a negotiator, as a mediator for a very long time. It's not just this Hamas and Israel war. And even before this war, Qatar was helping Hamas members, supporting them, talking to them about the situation in the occupied Gaza Strip and in the occupied West Bank. Now, Mustafa, tell me about the mediation efforts. What will happen to the mediation efforts? Because yesterday, Al-Thani said that Qatar will continue to negotiate. He did not signal that Qatar will end the talks or withdraw from the talks, because everyone was expecting that Qatar, because of this attack, Qatar would withdraw from these negotiations to end the war in Gaza. How are you looking at the ceasefire efforts from this point onwards?
Omar, Qatar can be considered as one of the most important mediators or facilitators in the world politics. And since the very beginning of the crisis in Gaza, Qatar has been trying to play its role to reach a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But I think that Israel's latest attacks in Doha are complicating the ceasefire efforts for the Gaza Strip. As you know, United States and Egypt are also participating in the ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, but there will be some ramifications coming from the Israeli strikes. I think that there will be a political deadlock in the continued negotiations between Hamas and Israeli decision makers. But personally, I don't think that Israel is interested peace, dialogue and diplomacy right now. They are trying to make Israel the only regional hegemon in the Middle East, and they are always calling for the dissolution of Hamas. But I don't think that if Hamas decides to dissolve itself and lay down their weapons, Israel will stop its military campaign in the region, because Israel has biggest agenda in the Middle East, and they are pursuing expansionist geopolitical agenda. If they eliminate Hamas threat, I think they will fabricate another excuse to continue their military offensive in the region. Yes, Qatar and Egypt can play an important role in terms of facilitating or mediating diplomatic talks between Israel and Hamas. I don't think that Israel will take these negotiations seriously, and they will continue to turn a blind eye to international criticism over the dire humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories.
Mustafa, thanks for that analysis. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you, Mark.
Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani held a phone call on Tuesday to discuss Israel's recent strike in Doha that targeted Hamas political delegation. Erdogan conveyed his condolences over the deaths caused by what he called a heinous attack, stressing that Ankara firmly stands with the Qatari people. He condemned the strike as an act aimed at deepening regional conflict and clearly violating the sovereignty of friendly ally Qatar. The two leaders discussed potential joint steps in response and reaffirmed their determination to cooperate in international forums to halt what they described as ongoing massacres in Gaza. The Israeli assault has drawn swift condemnation across the Middle East and beyond, with critics warning it risks further destabilizing the region and undermining ceasefire negotiations long hosted by Qatar. Erdogan's strong rebuke signals Ankara's intent to push for greater international accountability while reinforcing its solidarity with Doha as both nations seek to contain the fallout of Israel's expanding military campaign. Turkey and Qatar share a long-standing strategic partnership rooted in political, economic, and security cooperation. The two countries have frequently coordinated on regional issues, including mediating conflicts and supporting stability in the Middle East. Recent coordination following Israel's strike on Hamas leaders in Doha highlights the resilience of the bilateral relationship, as Ankara and Doha reaffirmed mutual support and a commitment to jointly address regional security challenges.
U.S. President Donald Trump voiced discontent over Israel's latest strike in Doha, saying he was not thrilled with the attack and emphasizing that efforts should focus on the securing of hostages.
Mr. President, about the Israeli strike earlier today.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it. I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this: we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Did you tell you in advance, Mr. President? Did Israel tell you in advance? No. So you were caught by surprise.
I'm never surprised by anything, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
How did you learn about this happening?
I'll be giving a full statement tomorrow, but I would tell you this: I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
Mr. President, when you plan to speak...
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the Pakistani capital is political analyst Javed Rana. Javed, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Umar.
Javed, some tough times we're witnessing, right? What's going to be the fallout from these attacks? We know how Middle Eastern countries have reacted. We've seen the response from Qatar as well. But how will this impact diplomacy in the Middle East?
Well, I think diplomatic fallout is quite obvious. Even Israel's own partners in the Europe, like UK, France, and other countries, they all have come up with a statement which is almost condemning this horrible attack. But again, the bigger problem is that does this fallout, this diplomatic fallout, for apartheid Israel matter? The answer is no, because for Israel, it looks like that Israel seems to have now very safely assumed that whatever it undertakes, it doesn't matter. International reaction simply doesn't matter because they are controlling all wheels of power in the Europe. all wheels apart in Washington. But again, that may turn out to be an illusion in the long run, because the kind of the reaction, kind of the fallout that we have seen, I think it will have huge consequences for Israel in times to come. Because I think regionally now, even the Arab North, who have been informal allies of Israel, now they are feeling very uncomfortable. They feel very much insecure, because they believe that if Qatar has been attacked, the next could be possibly their turn. They are in line to be possibly targeted next time. Also in the context that Israel's Prime Minister has said that, quote unquote, he spiritually feels connected with the cause of greater Israel. I think that explains everything. That explains everything what Israel intends to do it. I think it would be understatement to say that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu is following his expansionist design just because he's facing tough political time at home. I think domestic reasons is just an isolated picture. We have to see the broader picture. This is not for the sake of the repetition. This is a very systematic, fascist, religious, ideological agenda of apartheid state, where nobody matters, where Arabs don't matter, where Muslims don't matter, where Palestinians don't matter. And whatever they want to do, they are doing it. Now, we have seen the hypocritical statement coming from President Donald Trump. Just 2 days ago, he's been saying that there is going to be a peace deal. It's going to happen so soon. Hamas had agreed upon all those terms and conditions. Hamas political bureau in Doha was there to discuss its contours and discuss how to get it implemented. And right at that time, they came under attack. They were supposedly on a safe place, a country which is a so-called ally of the USA. I think it is a message for many Arab monarchs who have been hosting Israel's military bases in their countries. They are not safe. You may recall, it's not the first time. Let's not just see a micro picture. We have to see what had happened with Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago when Houthis were attacking Saudi Arabia's oil refineries. Did US come to help Saudi Arabia? No. The answer is no. Arab countries have to understand that if they cannot defend themselves, then at least they have to rely upon their reliable partners, their genuine friends, like Turkey. Turkey has its military base in Qatar. Turkey has thousands of its troops in Qatar. And I think Qatar can also invite Pakistan. Pakistan military is very strong. Pakistan's Air Force is a battle-hardened. And I think this is the time that Qatar needs to ask USA goodbye, because USA simply cannot defend its land, cannot defend its aerial space. Reason is quite simple. When Donald Trump say that whatever has happened, from now onwards, there would not be any breach of sovereignty. This is nonsense. This is not going to happen. Nobody listened to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has power, but Donald Trump has huge weaknesses. He is being controlled by the Epstein file. His sex scandals with underage teenage girls is at the heart of the problem, because he's being blackmailed, he's being exploited by Israel's intelligence network like Mossad. And that is why he has not been able to undertake any meaningful action against apartheid Israel. And that is why we have seen that even during his tenure, we have seen that he accorded recognition to the Golan Heights, which is a disputed territory. He had no problem when Israel made Jerusalem as its capital. He recognized it. And then he came up with the so-called Ibrahim Accord, just to make the Muslim countries foolish. And he has made them very, very successful foolish. We have seen that this was the Abraham Accord, because of which Hamas and Palestinian jihadi leaders, Palestinian people, they felt isolated. They thought that this two-state solution is going to be over. That is why October 7, 2023, military operation was undertaken by Hamas. It is the Abraham Accord which was at the heart of the problem. All I'm saying is US is a part of the problem, is not part of the solution. It cannot, and it has not, and it would not defend any Arab countries. Qatar has to realize it. Qatar has to indigenize its defense. Qatar has to recruit its own citizens. It has to get citizens from the other Muslim countries. Has to build up its own bigger military force. Has to build up its own bigger air force, and hugely depend on Turkey, which is obviously very reliable partner, proven partner. And then again, I have to repeat it, Pakistan. Pakistan's military can help Qatar. It's not the USA which can save Qatar. We have been to Qatar, Doha. It's a very sophisticated, refined capital. Look at the scale of the infrastructure that Qatar has built over the period of the time. But again, no, Israel doesn't care about anything. It has basically demolished the peaceful environment in Qatar. The venue, the site where attack happened, I think not far from there were schools, were the embassies, foreign embassies were there. But Israel simply doesn't care. All I'm saying is that this is the high time that the Arab monarchs, this Gulf Cooperation Council, they need to have an emergency meeting. And I think they need to have bigger strategy where they should not just focus on Hamas. They should not focus on supporting behind the scene to Israel to eliminate Hamas. This is a micro picture. The bigger picture is that their own states are now under threat.
Javed, you were mentioning about the Abraham Accords. I have a question about that, but before I get to that question, I want to ask you, how did Israel manage to penetrate the Qatari airspace? Because there's the Al Udeid Air Base as well, the United States' biggest military air base in the Middle East. So what was going on last night?
I think Mossad's intelligence network is there. It's everywhere in the Middle East. They have managed to penetrate. They knew about the movements of Hamas leaders in Qatar. And once they had the intelligence, then carrying out an attack is not something big, because they have all kind of the weaponaries with the help of the satellite. They can precisely locate about the locations of these leaders, and they did it. Out of luck, most of them have survived. Because Israel has always been against the top leadership. Now, the bigger problem is that this managing how to penetrate inside Qatar, I don't think there is a bigger problem. Also, we have to see it with a pinch of salt. If we think that U.S. intelligence was there to inform Qatar, I think we should not be fool ourselves. That was not the case. As a matter of fact, the U.S. military assets were helping out. That's my assessment. They were helping out, providing all kind of intelligence, providing all kind of aerial intelligence to the apartheid Israel, helping it to carry out this attack. So all I'm saying is that these military assets of the Americans have turned out to be, in fact, counterproductive. They are in partnership, in league with the apartheid Israel, which is pursuing an obvious expansionist agenda. Now we are looking at, again, a smaller picture, a micro picture, where Israel has been carrying out on the neighboring countries, on the Arab countries. You know, once this Gaza episode is over, this genocide is over, God forbid, if all Palestinians are expelled to somewhere else, then we know the next target is the occupied West Bank, where already simultaneously they are carrying out military, so-called genocidal military operations there. Not very different to what is happening in Gaza. Then I think there would be full-scale attacks on the neighboring countries, more particularly on Syria. That would be the beginning point. And then they will go after, under some pretext, in Egypt, and then Jordan. And finally, they would move towards Saudi Arabia. This is not something that I am predicting. This is something which Israel's analysts, which Israel's historians, they have written in books. They have already laid down their plan, what they intend to do. And again, I have to here recall and remind you of what Turkey has been proposing during OIC conference, along with Iran and other countries, that there has to be a trade bloc of apartheid Israel. Turkey has done it as unilaterally. It has an impact, but again, this impact has to be multiplied, and this cannot happen unless Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, more particularly, they come into action in unison. That is not happening. Saudi Arabia, though, has not formally recognized the state of Israel, but at the same time, it has given airspace rights to Israel. Israel's passenger plane move freely over the airspace of Saudi Arabia. Israel's sporting activities are allowed inside Saudi Arabia. Israeli citizens are allowed even to enter in holy cities, Makkah, Mawzma, and Medina Munawwara, and under the established Islamic law, no Muslim can enter into these two holy cities, which have been the target of the Zionists. They want to occupy these two holy lands. That is a part and parcel of their expansionist agenda. Everybody knows this. But the bigger problem is that these Arab monarchs are sleeping. They have not allowed their people to have freedom of association. They have not allowed their own people to have freedom of association. More particularly, they have not built up a strong military because they felt threatened that the military can stage a coup and then they can be overthrown. Now, for the sake of their own survival, they have destroyed the Arab world. And that is at the heart of the problem. Now they have been relying upon hired guns, hired American guns, which are known to be very deceptive, which have the very bigger track record of cheating the Muslim world historically, and they think they can defend them. They cannot defend them. They will be partners in the expansionist agenda of Israel.
Javed, Israel says that it attacked Hamas. It did not attack Qatar. So that's a very funny statement coming from the Israeli government. But we all know that this attack has failed. It was a miscalculated attack. And obviously, Israel wanted to target the top Hamas leadership, for example, Khalil al-Hayya, who is the chief negotiator for Hamas, and he was in Qatar. Now, what could be the consequences, Javed, of this miscalculated attack?
I think, look at the brief track record. Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran when he was holding negotiations for a peace deal. There was an attack on Iran all of a sudden when Iran was negotiating with the USA for a peace deal on nuclear issue. And I think they were perhaps somewhere close to some kind of a loose arrangement on nuclear peace deal. And now when President Donald Trump just announced around 30 hours before that he intends to have some kind of a peace, permanent ceasefire in Gaza, there was an attack on the top negotiating team. It clearly means Israel simply does not want peace. Israel always needs a war. Israel is a perhaps only country in the world which does not have its official map, because that official map cannot be made at this particular point of time, because Israel believe that they have their right over almost all over of Middle East, even parts of Turkey. So that we have to see that bigger picture. As long as the Arab monarchs don't see that bigger picture, as long as Arab monarchs do not stop eliminating the little resistance they find to their power, I think these kind of things keep on happening. For Arab monarchs, Akhwanul Muslimin, Muslim Brotherhood is the bigger problem. For them, Israel is not a problem. Now, this is the time they need to realize that Israel is the biggest problem. Israel is a friend of none. Israel is not friend of even USA. US's power on the world stage has dramatically diminished. Its influence, its clout has dramatically diminished simply because Israel does not listen to the Americans, simply because Israel has its agenda. It's a religious agenda. It doesn't care about anyone. I think there is an extremist mindset in Tel Aviv. We have to understand they are not understanding the language of rationality. As I've been saying it for last 2 years in your program and also in previous programs, that Israel would not stop attacking Gaza as long as there is a concerted effort, military response, or a genuine trade bloc of Israel. This war would continue in one way or the other.
Political analyst Javed Rana, thank you so much for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you on the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kojakanar, thank you so much for being with us in the studios.
Thank you, Umar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.